Well, looks like it's a wrap. That boy Taylor Heinicke is officially gone to the Falcons on a 2-year, $10 million deal. Of course, I want to break down everything that went down behind the scenes about whether the Commanders actually wanted to bring him back or not. And if they did, how much? Was he a priority? Also, definitely want to take some time to thank him. Talk about his brief but very memorable journey with us. Of course, I'm happy to see him go play for his hometown team, the Falcons, at least for him. Y'all know the Falcons are the team I hate the most in the entire NFL. So I'm going to hate rooting against them if he ends up playing, but it is what it is, man. Cannot see the Falcons be great. Can't do that. Never. But also, most importantly, as far as the Commanders go, who are we going to get to basically replace the Taylor Heinicke's presence on the team? Rivera already said at the Combine that he's going to do anything it takes to bring in some type of a veteran quarterback. He said even if they draft a quarterback and have Sam Howell, he would still sign a veteran quarterback and just carry 3 quarterbacks every week on the roster. So let's take a look at all of the veteran quarterback options out there and which one will be the best for us and which one I prefer, because those are 2 completely different answers. Also, who are some other Commanders players that Rivera and company are trying to keep and trying to re-sign and retain and all of that type of stuff? And the fact that Cole Holcomb was a maybe is pretty crazy. Do they expect that much out of Cody Barton? But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up every Sunday for the Commanders call-in live stream where I open up the phone lines. You call in, you contribute whatever you want to the show. If you have a question, a debate topic, or any opinions, let your voice be heard when you call in to the show. Also, stay tuned for everything free agency, draft, mock drafts, film sessions, everything. Stay tuned. Without further ado, let's get it. Alright, so Ian Rapoport originally tweeted 2 hours ago, the Falcons are signing former Commanders quarterback Taylor Heinicke per me and Mike Garafolo. With plenty of starting experience, Atlanta adds a veteran to their QB room. For the Falcons and Taylor Heinicke, it's a 2-year deal worth up to $20 million. Atlanta has said Desmond Ridder is the starter, and so that's basically top-end backup money for Taylor Heinicke. So there's multiple interesting things there. First of all, 2-year deal worth $20 million. You hear that and you're like, okay, Taylor Heinicke, $10 million a year. But when we get to his contract details a little later, you'll see that it's actually way less than that, especially cap hit wise. A lot of that is incentives. Also, it's really interesting that the Falcons have already decided that Desmond Ridder is the starter day 1. Whereas we're like, Sam Howell is QB1 as of today, but he hasn't been declared the starter. He still has to go out there and earn that starting spot. The Falcons already feel like Desmond Ridder is the starter pretty much no matter what happens this offseason. And so they went out and gave Taylor Heinicke all of that money to come in and be the definitive backup. He's not competing for the starting role. So I wanted to go ahead and get that situation already laid out so you know exactly what's going on. And shouts out to Taylor Heinicke, man. Appreciate everything you did. He left us a thank you note on his Instagram. He said, quote, wanted to take a moment and say thank you to Washington. The love and support has been unmatched the last couple of years. The memories I'll cherish forever. You gave me a second chance and it's forever changed my life, unquote. Now he did, I guess, tell his old Dominion coach about how disgruntled he was about getting benched for Carson Wentz and things like that. So he definitely has somewhat of a grudge against the Commanders. Like the next time we play the Falcons, if for some reason he's the starting quarterback for that game, he's gonna put his all in there. I mean, he does appreciate us for giving him a chance, but we were hearing some stuff a couple of weeks ago about how upset he was that Ron Rivera benched him for Carson Wentz late in the season. Now, he didn't come out and like straight up interview people and anybody with a microphone like Alex Smith was doing with the world tour, but you could just tell from people close to him, like his old coach back at Old Dominion, that he pretty much has just been venting to them this whole time. And then somebody put a microphone to the old coach and then he told everything that Taylor Heinicke said. So, and I don't blame him at all. But just to run down Taylor Heinicke's story: undrafted out of college, cut by 5 teams in 4 years, backup QB in the XFL, slept on his sister's couch, signed to the Washington football team's practice squad, and started 24 games in 2 years. And now he's about to potentially get $20 million if he meets all of his incentives. And so did the Commanders not prioritize bringing back Taylor Heinicke? Well, actually, you'll be pretty surprised. It's reported that they did want him back. How bad? We're not exactly sure, but John Com tweeted yesterday during all of the chaos with all of the other signings that were going on, it was a busy day for Washington. A big focus moving forward will be retaining their own notable players such as Taylor Heinicke. So they were focusing on bringing back Taylor Heinicke and some other players that we'll talk about later in the video, probably more than even bringing in more outside free agents at a certain point. So he was somewhat of a priority. It's not like he was a top priority and they're incredibly crushed by the fact that they didn't get him, but they definitely wanted him back. But John Com later tweeted, with Heinicke, I think they'll hold firm on a price, but the desire has long been to keep him around. So basically they wanted him back, but they weren't going to break the bank for him. They had a certain price they were willing to do, and apparently the Falcons were willing to go higher than that. So it's really interesting because so far the backup quarterback market is Case Keenum, who's gotten a deal for 1 year, $6.25 million with $4 million guaranteed. So that's probably a little bit more than Taylor Heinicke's. Then you have Mike White, 2 years up to $16 million, less than Taylor Heinicke's, and Jarrett Stidham, 2 years, $10 million, less than Taylor Heinicke. So that's so far the QB market. And then Spot Track was out here saying that Taylor Heinicke will end up getting $19.8 million per year. They were estimating that he would get a 3-year, $59 million deal. I already knew that was just a flat out lie. I already knew that. $19.8 million a year for Taylor Heinicke is insane. Love him. And anybody from Atlanta, I want you to get all the money you can get. But I already knew that wasn't going to happen. And just to let you know, Taylor Heinicke is from the Metro Atlanta area, Gwinnett, to be more precise. But he grew up a Packers fan, so even though I'm pretty sure he's really happy to be back home, this is not his favorite team growing up. Just to throw that out there as well. But JP Finlay tweeted the real numbers for Taylor Heinicke's deal: $4 million signing bonus, $6.3 million guaranteed, and up to $3 million in playing time and NFL playoff incentives available per year. So he's still getting a pretty good check guaranteed no matter what happens. But a lot of his money comes from, for whatever reason, he ends up starting, Desmond Ritter gets hurt, or Desmond Ritter ends up being sorry, which is quite likely. I'm not a huge Desmond Ritter fan, not rooting against him. Well, actually I am, now that he plays for the Falcons. It's nothing personal, but anybody on the Falcons, I'm rooting against you with every ounce of my body. But Desmond Ritter, isolated, I've never been a big believer in him coming out of the draft, so who knows? Taylor Heinicke could end up being the starter and actually reaching a lot of that money that's in the form of incentives in his contract. So we'll see. Now let's get to the most important part of this video. Some of the most notable names out there available in the QB market. Shouts out to Ben Standig for organizing this and putting his opinions to it. He said first Andy Dalton, and of course there's a Ken Zampese connection, who went from being our QB's coach the past couple of years to now our game manager and our senior offensive advisor and all of that type of stuff. And thank goodness, because we needed somebody to do that. I don't know why we didn't have somebody already doing that, specifically focusing all of their attention on that. But yeah, Andy Dalton and Ken Zampese have a connection from their time in Cincy. And Andy Dalton finished 9th in standard passer rating last season, believe it or not. Then you have Jacoby Brissett, ranked 8th in ESPN's adjusted QBR last season. Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Justin Herbert were the next 3 after him. But the concern, both would logically win a straight up competition over Sam Howell, which doesn't feel like the outcome Washington desires. So if we're having an honest QB battle in training camp, it is very likely that Andy Dalton and Jacoby Brissett could beat out Sam Howell. It's not an automatic, but if you bring those guys in, it's quite likely. And it just doesn't seem like it fits the plans of what the Commanders want to do. So then you have Baker Mayfield. And Ben Standig said, weird avow, since he's had a rough couple of years, but can still play. Probably in that Dalton Brissett category of too much perceived competition. Washington also has not reportedly checked in on him at this point. So between Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett, and Baker Mayfield, that may be a little bit too much for a backup quarterback. Maybe a little bit too much competition and not enough, you know, take Sam Howell under your wing, give him every piece of knowledge that you have so that he can start. No, these guys are trying to save their careers, so I don't think that will be a healthy relationship there either. Then you have Gardner Minshew, who does come with a lot of Taylor Heinicke qualities like moxie and energy and galvanizing the troops off the bench and things like that. That's an interesting option. Then you also have Marcus Mariota, and Ben Standig said that he and Howell are repped by the same agency, so that's probably not ideal. But Marcus Mariota has the desired mobility to run a really interesting offense that if, say, Sam Howell gets hurt, Marcus Mariota could pretty much run the same offense, but a little less arm strength, but more experience and a higher floor technically, because he's pretty much already kind of done it. He was playing fairly well for the Falcons at a certain point last season. Not overall, but you could definitely do much worse than Marcus Mariota as a backup quarterback at this point. Then, of course, you also have Carson Wentz, who technically knows the system and the organization, maybe not the offense though, because Eric Bieniemy is coming in as a new offensive coordinator. If Scott Turner was still here, maybe you can make the tiniest argument for Carson Wentz. But since there's an entirely new offense being installed anyway, there's really no benefit to having Carson Wentz here other than he's thrown passes to these receivers and tight ends before. That's really it. I mean, you have new offensive linemen coming in and everything. So all of that chemistry stuff, all of that already was here last year stuff doesn't necessarily apply to Carson Wentz because Eric Bieniemy is about to change a lot. And then also you have other pure backups, like just straight up, you know that they're not necessarily competing for the starting QB role, and that's Drew Lock, Chase Daniel, Joe Flacco, Nick Mullins, Kyle Allen, and Blaine Gabbert. Would the Commanders be interested in bringing Kyle Allen back? That seems more like a Scott Turner guy, but you never know. He has experience with his organization. Ron Rivera is familiar with them, all of that type of stuff. But it's kind of the same thing with Carson Wentz, if anything, even worse, because he has no experience in Eric Bieniemy's offense, so it doesn't really matter. But for me personally, and I know a lot of people may not agree with this, but I don't even want to risk getting a quarterback that can end up leading us to winning 7-8 games. Again, being perpetually average and in the middle in almost good enough to make the playoffs, but not quite good enough to make any noise in the playoffs or to make the playoffs at all or to be any real Super Bowl contenders. That little middle is the worst thing ever for me. Winning 7 to 9 games a season literally is worst case scenario for Rico of Street Score. So if we're going to bring in a quarterback, can it at the very least be a guy with some ceiling, but not much of a floor? Some guy that could potentially end up maybe being a franchise quarterback at the end of the day. If for some reason Sam Howell doesn't work out, if Sam Howell gets hurt, whatever. But I don't want to bring in this high floor guy to where if Sam Howell, again, either sucks or gets hurt, and then they come in and win us just enough games to get us excited about the playoffs, but not win enough games for us to actually make the playoffs and be a real threat in the playoffs. At that point, it's just pointless. I would prefer to go all in on figuring out how we're going to acquire Caleb Williams at that point. Winning 7-8 games is extremely pointless to me personally, but I understand why as players and why most fans would probably want to go with a really good backup that's ready to win you games this season in case Sam Howell doesn't work out for whatever reason. Whereas I'm the complete opposite. Give me the low floor, high ceiling guy, basically another almost Sam Howell situation, maybe like a Drew Lock, I guess, that comes in. Again, you already know he's for sure the backup. I mean, he'll compete technically with Sam Howell for the starting QB spot, but we already know Sam Howell should and definitely will win that QB battle between him and Drew Lock. And if Sam Howell, for whatever reason, doesn't work out, Drew Lock comes in and he's either going to be a franchise quarterback or he's going to be terrible, and then that will put us in good positioning to get Caleb Williams or Drake May or one of those top quarterbacks in this upcoming draft class. That's my preferred method, but again, I understand why some people would prefer to go to Gardner Minshew or Marcus Mariota, maybe even a Baker Mayfield type of method. I mean, there are probably a lot of people out there that don't believe in Sam Howell at all and would prefer to go ahead and get Jacoby Brissett or Andy Dalton that would pretty much win the QB competition day one, and then maybe Sam Howell would just have to work his way into being the starting QB at some point in the middle of the season. But I prefer the scenario where Sam Howell is your week 1 starting QB, and you know that going into mini camps, OTAs, training camp, all of that, and then you have a quarterback with a high ceiling there with a similar profile of low floor and high ceiling of Sam Howell. Either Drew Lock or somebody like Drew Lock's finds something just clicks in their head and they're just an elite quarterback, or they're terrible and we're getting Caleb Williams and Drake May in the draft. And now before we get up out of here, John Comm reported that the Commanders are also interested in bringing Jeremy Reeves back, who's a restricted free agent. They already brought back Khaleke Hudson as a restricted free agent on a 1-year deal. Let's see what Jeremy Reeves ends up getting, because the Saints paid their top special teams player more money than people usually pay those guys. So maybe Jeremy Reeves is looking at that like, hey, I want that, and if anything, even more, because I made all pro. That guy didn't. And then you have Efe Obada that they also want to prioritize bringing back, and then also Tyler Larson, among others, as tweeted by John Comm. But the most interesting thing is that he said that when he asked about Cole Holcomb, he was told, we'll see. And basically it's a maybe, especially after we sign Cody Barton. So that Cody Barton signing is affecting how much we prioritize bringing back Cole Holcomb. And I probably lowered the price that we're willing to give him. Before Cody Barton, we were probably willing to give Cole Holcomb a certain amount of money. After signing Cody Barton, that number probably went down. And so if Cole Holcomb isn't willing to take that number, he's probably going to end up going elsewhere because, again, he's not even that big of a priority for the Commanders at this point, which is crazy because I feel like Cody Barton has a lot of potential, but I still feel like you need to bring back some floor in a Cole Holcomb. I mean, granted, he was hurt a lot last year, but when healthy, he's playing 100% of your snaps on defense game after game after game, and I don't want to pay him a lot of money. I'm right there with the Commanders. I want to bring them back, but I'm not paying them a super crazy amount of money that another team may be willing to pay him. So ultimately, I hope we end up bringing him back, but I'm not giving him a huge check to do it. Like, he's not David Long. I really wanted David Long. He was probably my favorite free agent available in this free agency class, regardless of position, just based on value, with how much talent he has and how much his market value was and how much money he would get and all of that type of stuff. So per dollar, David Long was my favorite potential free agent target that we can get, and this makes me even sadder that the Commanders were interested, but we couldn't get the deal done. And Ben Standig tweeted, as we wait to see what the Commanders do with Chase Roulier's contract, there's interest in keeping free agent Tyler Larsen. And he pointed out a good fact that I forgot. He finished with another season injury, of course, so we got to keep track of that. 2 in a row, just like Chase Roulier. Both of those guys just can't stay healthy at center. But remember, Tyler Larsen at center, we went 6-1-1. Kind of like them Brandon Sheriff stats. When he starts, we just win for whatever reason. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And as always, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. Let me know how you feel about this whole Taylor Heinicke situation. Who is your preferred backup vet QB? Do you feel like Cole Holcomb should be a priority to bring back? And let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. And again, leave a like on the way out, please. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.